The night was quiet, but not peaceful. The street looked calm from the outside, yet something was wrong. A shadow moved near the edge of the driveway, and the security camera caught everything. A woman's voice, sharp, angry, almost shaking with rage, echoed through the empty night. "Open this door right now," she screamed. Her bright flashlight waved across the driveway like she was searching for something to blame. The camera zoomed in on her face, an older lady with tight lips, short blonde hair, and a look that could cut through steel. Everyone in the neighborhood knew her as Karen, the HOA president, the self-proclaimed queen of rules. But tonight, she wasn't just angry. She looked desperate. And the narrator, watching the clip on his screen, finally said in a calm voice, This is the night everything exploded. And this is the night Karen realized she never should have touched my driveway." He paused, letting the audience stare at the frozen frame of Karen pointing at the camera like she wanted to fight it. "But let me take you back to how this mess really started. 2 weeks earlier, he had moved into what looked like a quiet and friendly neighborhood. He wanted a fresh start, some peace, some silence, and maybe even a friendly community. The type of place where neighbors wave good morning and kids ride bikes in the afternoon. But his first impression changed quickly. The moving truck was still half full when he heard footsteps coming up the driveway. He expected a smiling neighbor offering cookies or a welcome message. Instead, he saw her. Karen. Clipboard in hand. Glasses on her nose. Smile tight like she was holding in a complaint. "Oh, hello," she said without warmth. "You must be the new owner." He nodded politely. "Yes, just moving in today." "Well," she said, walking past him like she owned the property, "as HOA president, I must make sure everything follows our guidelines." "You understand." He didn't understand, but he didn't argue. She looked around the house with slow, judging eyes, scanning every corner like she was searching for a crime. "That mailbox is slightly higher than allowed," she muttered, writing on her clipboard. "It came with the house," he replied gently. She ignored him. Then she turned toward the driveway and stared at it like it offended her. "We have very strict driveway standards here," Karen said. "Very strict. I'll need to check the measurements soon." He forced a polite smile, even though her tone already felt like a warning. "Sure. Let me know if there's anything important." Karen lowered the clipboard and looked him directly in the eyes. "Oh, I will," she said. It was the first moment he realized she was not a normal neighbor. She was a storm pretending to be a person. The next morning, he found a note taped to his front door. Not a welcome note. Not a friendly reminder. A warning. Your driveway is not in compliance. Fix immediately. He frowned. The driveway was perfect. Smooth, clean, and freshly sealed by the previous owner. He checked every corner. There was nothing wrong. So he called the HOA office. They said they had never sent any warning. They had no record of it. They had no rule about driveways at all. It didn't take long for him to understand who sent the note. Karen. But when he approached her later, politely asking for clarity, she didn't react like a normal person who made a mistake. Instead, she acted offended. "I make the rules here," she said sharply. "If I say something is wrong, then it is wrong." He calmly explained what the HOA office told him. Karen's eyes narrowed. "Well," she said, "some people just don't understand how this community works." Then she turned around and walked away, nose held high. That was the second red flag. Over the next few days, small things kept happening, things he didn't understand at first. Karen walked by his house a little too often. She took pictures of his front yard for no reason. She stood near his driveway with her phone, pretending she was inspecting. It felt strange, almost like she was trying to catch him doing something wrong. But he had done nothing wrong at all. Then came the moment that changed everything. One early morning, when the sun wasn't even fully up, he saw bright orange marks sprayed on his driveway. Not just one or two marks, several lines, circles, and arrows, drawn like some kind of blueprint. He stared at them in confusion. What was this? Who did this? Why did they touch his driveway without permission? As he bent down to look closer, he heard a familiar voice behind him. Oh good, you saw it, Karen said, holding a can of orange spray paint like it was a weapon. You did this? He asked, shocked. Karen didn't even hide it. Yes, I did. Your driveway needs correction. I marked where the adjustments will be. Adjustments, he said slowly. Karen, you had no right to spray paint my property. But Karen rolled her eyes. You're new here. You'll understand eventually. The HOA trusts my judgment. It's for the good of the community. He kept calm, though irritation built inside him. Please do not touch my property again. Ever. Karen laughed under her breath. We'll see about that. Then she walked away, leaving the bright orange marks glowing in the morning light. He stood there silently, staring at his driveway, realizing he was dealing with someone who believed she was above the rules, someone who thought she could control everyone and everything around her. He didn't know it yet, but this was only the beginning. Things were about to get worse, much worse. And the night shown in the security camera footage? That night happened because he finally took a stand. But Karen didn't like being told no. And she was about to pick the wrong fight. Because this time, he had evidence. He had patience. And he had a plan. Everything that followed, all of it, happened because Karen ignored every warning he gave her. And soon, she would regret ever touching his driveway. The sun was glowing softly the next morning, but the narrator's mind was not calm. The orange marks on his driveway still bothered him. They were loud, ugly, and unwanted, like someone had drawn a map for trouble. And that someone was Karen. He had planned to spend the morning unpacking, maybe setting up his new workspace. But instead, he found himself holding a bucket and a scrub brush, trying to wash off Karen's inspection artwork. The paint wouldn't come off easily. As he scrubbed harder, he heard slow footsteps walking down the sidewalk. He didn't need to look up. He already knew who it was. Karen. She walked like a queen checking her kingdom. Her shoulders pressed back, her chin slightly raised, her eyes scanning everything with judgment. She stopped right in front of his driveway, arms crossed. You're wasting your time, she said. He stood, wiping his hands on a towel. Good morning to you too. Karen didn't smile. Those marks are required. They show what needs to be fixed. He pointed at the driveway. Nothing needs fixing. I checked with the HOA. Her eyes narrowed like thin blades. The HOA doesn't understand the ground issues here. I've lived in this neighborhood for 12 years. I know what's best. Karen, he said calmly, my driveway is my property. You had no permission. She stepped closer, too close. Everything in this community is connected. Your driveway affects the street, and the street affects the look of our block. We have standards here. He could feel her trying to intimidate him, but he didn't step back. Instead, he quietly asked, do those standards include spray painting someone's property? For a moment, Karen's confident face twitched. Just a small twitch, but enough to show she didn't expect pushback. It's my job, she said sharply. You're new. You don't understand. Then she turned and walked away again, leaving him with more questions than answers. Later that afternoon, the narrator decided he needed to learn more about this neighborhood. He walked down the street, hoping to meet normal people. Maybe someone could explain Karen's strange behavior. He didn't have to search long. An older man watering flowers waved at him. You must be the new guy, the man said with a friendly smile. Yeah. Just moved in. I'm Tom, the man said, offering a handshake. Nice to meet you. They talked for a bit, and the narrator finally asked the question that had been burning in his mind. So, Karen. Is she always like this? Tom sighed so deeply it sounded almost rehearsed. Oh boy. Karen is, well. Karen. That bad? Tom glanced around like he was checking for spies. She means well, but she loves rules a little too much. And she likes controlling people even more. The narrator nodded. He had already guessed that. You're not the first to deal with her driveway obsession, Tom continued. Last year she told my wife our driveway was too dark. Too dark? How can a driveway be too dark? The narrator almost laughed. So she makes up rules? Sometimes, Tom whispered. Sometimes she believes things are rules even when they aren't. And sometimes, she just wants to feel powerful. The narrator thanked him and continued his walk. His neighborhood suddenly felt less peaceful and more like a place with invisible landmines, Karen being the biggest one. That evening, he sat on his porch, enjoying a cup of coffee as the sky turned orange. He hoped the day would end quietly. But fate had different plans. He heard Karen's voice again, this time from across the street. She was talking loudly to another neighbor, waving her hands like she was giving orders. He couldn't hear everything, but he caught small pieces. Driveway, measurements, violation, non-standard. The neighbor she was talking to looked uncomfortable, nodding quickly just to end the conversation. As Karen walked away, she glanced at his house. Not just a normal glance. A slow, cold look that said, "I'm watching." He ignored it. He didn't want a war. He just wanted to live peacefully. But Karen wasn't done. The next morning, he walked outside to take out the trash. And something stopped him cold. Another paper was taped to his front door. In bold writing. Second warning, failure to address driveway issue will result in fee. He felt heat rise in his chest, not anger yet, just disbelief. He opened the notice. It wasn't from the HOA office. It had the same handwriting as the first warning. Karen's handwriting. He walked straight toward her house. He wasn't going to shout or fight, just ask her directly. But halfway down the sidewalk, he saw her step outside. She looked at him like she already knew why he was coming. Yes, she said, pretending to be innocent. Karen, did you leave this notice? I don't see why that matters, she replied, folding her arms. The issue must be fixed. He held up the paper. The HOA said there is no issue. Karen's smile tightened. They don't see the full picture. What picture? He asked. Show me. Explain it. She hesitated, a tiny flicker of uncertainty crossed her face. But only for a second. Then she snapped back. It's not my job to educate you. Just follow instructions. He shook his head. I'm not fixing something that isn't broken. And if you leave one more fake warning on my door, I'll report it. Karen stepped forward, her voice low and cold. You don't want to do that. Why not? Because I know how this HOA works, she whispered. And I know how to make things difficult. It wasn't a threat. It was a promise. For the first time, he felt a real chill. Karen wasn't just annoying. She was dangerous in a quiet, manipulative way. He turned around without another word. He didn't want to argue on the street. But as he walked back, he sensed her eyes burning into his back. This wasn't over. Karen wouldn't stop. And deep down, the narrator realized something. If he didn't take control soon, Karen would turn this peaceful neighborhood into a battlefield. He just didn't know that the real fight, the worst part, was still coming. The driveway drama was only the beginning. For the next 2 days, the narrator tried to ignore Karen. He told himself she just needed time to calm down. Maybe she would eventually lose interest and move on to another neighbor. But Karen was not someone who moved on. She was someone who held on to things like a dog holding a bone. And early Thursday morning, he realized she was not backing down. He walked outside to grab a package left on his porch. When he bent down to pick it up, he noticed something strange on the door again. Another paper. Another warning. But this one looked different, bigger, bolder, and angrier. Across the top in thick red letters. Final notice, driveway violation. Below that, written in Karen's shaky handwriting. Failure to comply will result in disciplinary action. He read it twice. Disciplinary action? For a driveway? He looked around the street. Everything was quiet. No kids playing. No dogs barking. No neighbors walking. But somewhere, behind some curtain, he was sure Karen was watching. Watching him read her note. Watching his reaction. Watching her plan unfold. He took a deep breath and walked back inside. This was getting out of hand. The first thing he did was call the HOA office again. A younger man answered the phone. His voice was friendly, almost too friendly. Hi. This is Jake from HOA support. How may I help you? The narrator explained everything, every warning, every spray-painted mark, every fake rule. Jake listened patiently, but the surprise in his voice grew with every sentence. Sir, none of this is real, Jake finally said. We don't issue driveway violations. There are no warnings. And no one from our office has visited your property. So these notices are fake? Yes. Definitely fake. We've had complaints before, but nothing this serious. Let me guess, the narrator said. Were they also about Karen? Jake went silent. A long silent moment. That silence told him everything. I'm not allowed to comment on that, sir, Jake whispered. But please document everything. Every note. Every message. Every action. If you feel uncomfortable, you can file a formal report. The narrator hung up and leaned back in his chair. This wasn't just annoying anymore. This was deliberate. Karen was creating rules that didn't exist, running her own personal HOA inside the real HOA. And she had chosen him as her new project. That afternoon, while he was sweeping the garage, he heard something outside. The sound of paper being taped. He stepped out quietly and caught Karen in the act. She froze mid-motion, her hand still pressed against his front door, tape roll hanging from her wrist. For 1 second, they just stared at each other. Karen recovered first. Oh, she said, trying to pretend nothing strange was happening. I was just leaving this for you. He kept his voice calm. Karen, we've talked about this. You have no authority. Karen lifted her chin higher. I have more authority than you think. No, he said, you don't. Her face stiffened. A slow, angry red began to spread across her cheeks. You don't understand how this community works, she snapped. I'm trying to protect our neighborhood. People like you bring chaos. People like me, he repeated, eyebrow raised. Karen suddenly stepped closer, far too close, as if personal space was a myth she didn't believe in. Yes, she whispered. People who don't follow direction. People who think they know better. People who think rules don't apply to them. I'm not breaking any rules, he said. You're the one creating them. Karen's nostrils flared. That driveway of yours is lowering our community value. He almost laughed. How does a normal driveway lower value? You don't see it, Karen hissed. But I do. I see everything. The way she said it, it wasn't normal. It didn't sound like someone who cared about rules. It sounded like someone who needed control. Someone who couldn't stand being told no. Karen ripped the paper from his door and tried to shove it into his hand. Sign this, she demanded. It's a compliance form. He didn't take it. And that was when something changed in Karen's eyes. Her friendly mask, fake as it was, completely fell off, revealing the real Karen underneath. Cold. Calculated. Determined. Fine, she said quietly. If you want to be difficult. I can be difficult too. Then she walked away, her shoes clicking sharply on the pavement like she was marching into battle. That night, he set up a camera facing the driveway. Something told him Karen wasn't done. And he was right. At 2:17 a.m., the motion sensor beeped. He checked the live feed. There she was. Karen. In a long coat. Carrying a flashlight and a clipboard. She bent down, touching the driveway with her fingers like she was examining crime scene evidence. She wrote something on her clipboard. She circled the same spot 3 times. She shook her head dramatically like she was disappointed. Then she took out a measuring tape. At 2 in the morning. She measured the driveway edges. Then she measured the distance from the driveway to the sidewalk. Then the slope. All under the glow of her flashlight. If anyone drove by, they would probably think she was searching for hidden treasure. The narrator stared at the screen, unsure whether to laugh or be alarmed. Then Karen walked up to the camera. Looked directly into it. And smirked. She knew she was being watched. And she didn't care. That smirk told him everything. Karen wasn't going to stop. This wasn't about rules. This wasn't about the community. This wasn't about a driveway. This was personal. She wanted control. And he had taken it from her by standing up. Now she was starting a war he never asked for. But he was done being passive. Done hoping she would back off. Done pretending the problem would solve itself. If Karen wanted a fight, she was about to get one. And soon, she would regret ever starting it. For 2 days, the narrator tried to act normal. He went to work, cooked meals, cleaned the house, and pretended not to think about Karen's midnight driveway inspections. But his mind wasn't calm. Every time he walked past a window, he checked the driveway. Every time a leaf fell or a bird landed, his thoughts went back to Karen carrying her flashlight at 2 a.m., measuring his concrete like it was a crime scene. He knew something was coming. He could feel it, like the heavy air before a storm. And he was right. Saturday morning began quietly. The weather was perfect, the street was peaceful, and for a moment, the neighborhood looked like the picture he saw online before moving here. He brewed coffee, stepped onto his porch, and took a deep breath. For half a second, he felt hope. Maybe Karen finally realized she had gone too far. Maybe she decided to leave him alone. That hope lasted exactly 12 seconds. Because when he turned his head toward the driveway, his heart dropped. Bright, thick white paint, fresh and sticky, now covered almost the entire left side of the concrete. Not random lines like before. This time, it looked official, like someone had marked areas to be cut or removed. Huge X's. Long arrows. Circles. Numbers. It looked like a construction site map. He walked closer, hands shaking, not from fear, but from disbelief. Who did this? But deep down, he already knew. Karen. He didn't even have time to think because he suddenly heard her voice behind him. "Good morning," she said, smiling as if nothing unusual was happening. He turned slowly. Karen stood there holding the same clipboard, looking proud of the disaster she created on his driveway. "Karen," he said quietly. "You didn't do this." "Oh, I did," she replied cheerfully, tapping the clipboard. "We had to mark the correction zones." "Correction for what?" "There is nothing wrong with this driveway." Karen shrugged. "You may not see it. But I do. These areas must be adjusted for community consistency." He stared at her. He almost laughed. Almost shouted. Almost walked away. Instead, he said the only thing he could think of. "You vandalized my property." Karen's eyes sharpened instantly. "No. I improved it." "You destroyed it," he corrected. She stepped forward, and her voice softened as if she expected him to agree with her. "You're new. You don't understand how things work here. A bad driveway reflects badly on the whole block. I'm doing this for everyone." "For everyone? Or for yourself?" he asked. Her smile broke. Anger cracked through. "You have an attitude problem," Karen said. "A big one. You think the rules don't matter to you. There are no rules, he said firmly. I checked. Karen froze. Her mouth opened slightly like someone had slapped the truth across her face. For a moment, she didn't speak. She just breathed hard through her nose. Then she said in a low, icy whisper. You shouldn't have done that. Done what? He asked. Gone above me. She took another step closer. This community trusts me. When you question me, you question order. He shook his head. Karen, I don't want drama. I just want you to leave my property alone. But she wasn't listening. She had stopped listening days ago. Karen pointed at the driveway markings. These are staying, she declared. And tomorrow, construction will begin. Construction, he repeated, stunned. Karen, you can't hire people to break my driveway. Actually, she said proudly, I already did. He didn't believe her. He thought she was bluffing. No one would agree to break a driveway without permission. Until Monday morning arrived. At 8:12 a.m., the narrator heard loud grinding outside. Loud. Metal on stone loud. He ran to the window. 2 workers stood at the edge of his driveway holding jackhammers. One of them wore ear protectors. The other looked confused, glancing between Karen and the driveway. Karen was standing right beside them, pointing with authority. Yes, start on that line, she ordered. Break this section first. The narrator rushed outside. What is going on? He shouted. The workers stopped instantly. Karen didn't. Oh good, you're awake, she said. We're beginning the correction process. No, he said firmly. Get away from my property. Karen folded her arms. I have approval. You do not have approval, he said. From who? Karen lifted her chin. From me. That's not how approval works, he replied. Before Karen could argue, one of the workers walked over. Sir, the worker said politely, she told us this driveway was part of the HOA and needed to be fixed urgently. She signed the work order. The narrator pointed at the driveway. This is my property. She has no right to ask you to break anything. The workers exchanged looks. Then one of them turned to Karen. Ma'am, is this true? Karen's voice jumped an octave. Don't listen to him. I run this community. I decide what gets fixed. One worker shook his head. We can't break a private driveway without the owner's permission. Karen erupted. Yes, you can. I said you can. Start the job now. No, the narrator said, stepping between them. If you touch that driveway again, I will call the police. Karen's eyes widened with fury, pure, burning fury. You wouldn't dare, she hissed. He pulled his phone from his pocket. I would. Karen froze. For the first time ever, she looked unsure. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. The workers packed up their tools. One of them said quietly, Sorry, sir. We didn't know. Karen stomped her foot like a child denied a toy. You're making a big mistake, she snapped. A very big mistake. He didn't respond. He recorded everything, her orders, her shouting, her fake authority. Karen saw the camera and panicked. You can't film me, she screamed. Oh yes, he said calmly. I can. For the first time, Karen retreated, taking fast, angry steps backward. She pointed at him with a shaking hand. You'll regret this, she spat. I promise you will. Then she walked away, her heels hitting the pavement like angry hammers. He looked at the broken edge of his driveway, just a small crack from where the workers had barely begun. This was no longer a disagreement. This was an attack. And Karen had just crossed the line. Whatever came next, she brought it on herself. The neighborhood was quiet after the workers left, but the silence didn't feel peaceful. It felt tense. Heavy. Like the calm after a volcano stops rumbling but hasn't fully cooled. The narrator stood in the driveway, staring at the small crack the workers left. It wasn't big. It wasn't deep. But it represented something bigger. Karen had finally touched something she had no right to touch. His property. His life. His peace. He bent down and touched the broken concrete. Only a few centimeters wide, hardly a crack, but still, it was wrong. Someone had tried to damage his home. Someone who believed she couldn't be stopped. From across the street, a window curtain fluttered. He saw it move, just slightly. A shape pulled back quickly. Karen was watching. Of course she was. Over the next few hours, the narrator tried to continue his day normally. He cleaned the kitchen. He answered emails. He even tried to fix lunch. But his mind couldn't focus. Every few minutes he felt the same cold anger rising inside him, slow, sharp, controlled, but powerful. Not rage. Not panic. Something stronger. A decision forming. He replayed Karen's words in his head. You'll regret this. But she was the one who should regret it. By late afternoon, he made up his mind. This needed to end. Not tomorrow. Not next week. Now. But he wasn't going to scream or argue. He wasn't going to act like Karen. He was going to do something she never expected. He was going to fight her with the thing she feared most: evidence. He started by collecting everything he had. Every warning note. Every message she sent. Every photo of the spray paint on the driveway. Every video his camera recorded, especially the late-night measuring scene. He organized them in a folder labeled HOA Incident Karen. Inside the folder were dozens of files. Too many for someone who claimed to be helping the neighborhood. Around 6 p.m., he walked out onto the porch to clear his head. That was when he saw Karen again. She stood at the end of her driveway, arms crossed, watching him. Her posture wasn't relaxed. It was tense. Angry. Like she was ready to explode if he took one wrong step. When she realized he saw her, she pretended to adjust her mailbox, something she had done perfectly fine for the past decade. She kept looking over her shoulder every few seconds. She was nervous. Good. She should be. But the narrator didn't react. He calmly walked back inside and closed the door. Around 7 p.m., a knock echoed through the house. Sharp. Fast. Impatient. He already knew who it was. When he opened the door, Karen stood there holding her clipboard like a shield. We need to talk, she demanded. No, he replied. We don't. Karen pushed her way forward as if she expected him to move aside for her. He didn't. You think you can stop community work, she said. You think you're special? No, Karen, he said. I think I have rights. Karen laughed, a short, broken laugh. Rights? In my neighborhood? Her voice was rising. Her face was red again. Her eyes were sharp and desperate. You embarrassed me in front of the workers, she snapped. You made me look stupid. You did that yourself, he said quietly. Karen's mouth opened, then closed again. She wasn't expecting calmness. She was expecting fear. But he wasn't afraid anymore. This ends now, he said. Karen leaned closer. Or what? Or I take everything I have to the HOA board. Her smile vanished. Her mask dropped again. You wouldn't, she whispered. I will, he answered. Karen stepped back, but not far. Just enough to show she was losing ground. You're making an enemy, she said softly, almost like a threat disguised as advice. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. He closed the door gently in her face. Karen didn't knock again. She didn't shout. She didn't say a word. But she stood there for almost a full minute before walking away. Slow steps. Heavy steps. The steps of someone who just realized the game had changed. That night, the narrator prepared his report. He wrote every detail. Step by step. Event by event. He added screenshots from the video. Pictures of the paint. Copies of the fake warnings. A timeline of her harassment. He made 3 versions. One for the HOA board. One for the city inspector. One for the local police. He wasn't sure which one would take action first, but someone would. Karen had crossed the line, and he wasn't letting her drag him deeper into her chaos. While organizing files, he heard something outside. A soft crunch of gravel. He checked his porch camera. There she was. Karen. Standing at the edge of his property. Not moving. Not talking. Just watching. Her face was pale. Her eyes were wide. She looked angry, but also scared. Maybe she finally realized she wasn't untouchable. He spoke softly to himself. It's over, Karen. But he knew something she didn't. This wasn't just about a driveway anymore. It was about power. Control. Obsession. And when someone like Karen loses control, they don't go down quietly. The next morning would decide everything. He would send the reports. He would expose everything she had done. But for now, he stood at the window, watching Karen stare at his house, gripping her clipboard like it was the only thing keeping her upright. The breaking point had arrived. But it wouldn't be his. It would be hers. The narrator woke up early the next morning with a strange feeling in his chest. Not fear. Not anger. Something colder. Clearer. Today was the day. Sunlight slipped through the blinds, lighting up the folder he had prepared last night. The folder that would decide Karen's fate. He picked it up, checked everything once again, and sent 3 emails. To the HOA board. To the city inspector. To the police non-emergency department. Every message had the same title. Formal complaint: harassment and property damage by HOA member, Karen. His finger hovered for just a second before clicking send. Once the emails were gone, a strange silence filled the room, like the quiet after a storm. He took a deep breath. He had done it. Now the day would reveal what happened next. By 8 a.m., the neighborhood was waking up. Cars started, sprinklers hissed, birds chirped, kids walked to school. But Karen was nowhere to be seen. Not in her yard. Not on her porch. Not patrolling the street like she usually did at sunrise. Her house looked unusually still. The narrator brewed coffee, sat near the window, and waited. He didn't expect anything to happen immediately. But he was wrong. At 8:37 a.m., a white SUV pulled into the cul-de-sac. A small logo on the door read, HOA Administration Official Visit. The narrator almost dropped his cup. 3 people stepped out. An older woman with a clipboard, a younger man with a camera, and another man carrying a thick binder. They weren't here for a friendly chat. They were here for an investigation. Karen's door flew open before they even reached her yard. She stepped out in a bright blue robe, hair messy, expression confused and defensive. "What are you doing here?" she asked sharply. The older woman raised her clipboard. "We received a formal complaint, Karen. Very serious issues." Karen glanced around the street quickly, panic growing on her face. "From who?" she snapped. "We can't discuss that yet," the woman replied calmly. "We need to speak with you." Karen forced a smile, but it looked cracked and shaky. "There must be a misunderstanding," she said. "I'm the one who keeps this neighborhood safe." "Yes," the investigator said, "and that's part of the concern." The narrator watched from behind his curtain. He didn't smile. He didn't cheer. He just watched. This was not revenge. This was justice. The HOA team spent almost 20 minutes walking through Karen's front yard, studying her car, her porch, the side of her house. They took pictures. They whispered among themselves. Karen followed them everywhere, talking too fast, too loudly, as if she could bury the truth under her voice. Finally, the older woman looked up at Karen and said, "We need to check your records. Please bring out your enforcement log and your violation letters." Karen froze. The narrator could almost feel the fear leaking out of her. I don't know what you mean," she stammered. "Yes, you do," the woman said firmly. "Your position requires documentation. Complete documentation." Karen didn't move. Her eyes darted across the street, straight toward the narrator's house. She knew. She knew exactly who reported her. But he didn't look away. He met her eyes with calm, steady silence. Her face twisted, fear, anger, confusion all mixed together. She turned back to the investigators. "My paperwork is not organized right now." "That's a problem," the woman said. "A serious one." Around 10 a.m., another vehicle entered the street. This time, a city inspector. He stepped out, holding the printed complaint in his hand. He spoke with Karen briefly, showing her the paperwork. Karen's voice rose so loudly that several neighbors peeked out their windows. "I didn't damage anything," she shouted. "He's lying. He's trying to destroy me." The inspector remained calm. "We have video evidence," he said. "We need to review your property boundaries." The narrator almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But then he remembered the threats. The paint. The nighttime measuring. The crack in his driveway. No, she had brought this on herself. By noon, Karen was pacing her front yard like a trapped animal. Her face was pale. Her hands were shaking. Her hair was wild from running inside and outside for documents she didn't actually have. She kept looking toward the narrator's house, but each time their eyes met, she looked away. She didn't shout at him. She didn't step onto his property. For the first time ever, Karen was silent. At 1 p.m., the HOA team walked across the street. Straight to the narrator. His heart jumped, he wasn't expecting that. The older woman smiled politely. "Sir, may we speak with you for a moment?" "Of course," he said. They asked if they could see the driveway, the paint marks, and the spots Karen had measured. He showed them everything. They took more photos. They checked his camera footage. They even measured the property line themselves, carefully, quietly, professionally. Then the woman said, "Thank you. This helps a lot." Before leaving, she added in a lower voice, "And sir, you were right to report this." He nodded but said nothing. He didn't need to. Karen watched from her porch, gripping the railing so hard her knuckles turned white. When the HOA left his driveway, she rushed inside her house and slammed the door. A few minutes later, the narrator heard shouting, muffled but intense. Maybe she was yelling into the phone. Maybe she was yelling at herself. Maybe she was finally facing everything she had done. Whatever it wasn't calm. Karen's world was collapsing. Piece by piece. By late afternoon, the street returned to normal. The HOA cars were gone. The inspector had left. Even the neighbors were pretending nothing unusual had happened. But Karen didn't come outside again. Her blinds stayed closed. Her porch stayed empty. The neighborhood felt different, lighter somehow. The narrator sat on his porch as the sun began to set, feeling the cool breeze for the first time in weeks. This wasn't the end. Not yet. The next steps would be even bigger. But for the first time, Karen wasn't in control. And she knew it. Night came quickly that day, but Karen's lights stayed off. Her house, normally bright and loud, sat in complete darkness. No porch light. No TV glow in the windows. Not even the sound of footsteps. The neighborhood felt peaceful. Too peaceful. The narrator sat in his living room, the house quiet around him. He expected Karen to burst out at any moment, shouting, accusing, demanding control back. But she didn't. Instead, she vanished behind her closed blinds like a shadow afraid of the sun. He waited. And finally, at 9:12 p.m., the silence broke. A soft knock tapped against his front door. Not angry. Not rushed. Just desperate. He already knew who it was. When he opened the door, Karen stood there, hugging a thick pile of papers against her chest. Her hair was a mess, her eyes were red and tired, and her voice trembled. "Can we talk?" she whispered. For the first time since he had known her, Karen didn't look like a bully. She looked like someone whose entire world had slipped out of her hands. "Talk about what?" he asked calmly. Karen swallowed hard. "About everything." They stepped onto the porch. Karen didn't dare enter his home, maybe for the first time. She respected a boundary. She held up the papers in her hands. Violation letters. Fake warnings. Notes she had sent. Her secret records. But they weren't organized. They weren't official. They were messy, scribbled pages full of personal anger instead of HOA rules. "I messed up," she said quietly. "The HOA, they said I broke rules. Serious rules." She tried to laugh, but it came out as a shaky breath. "They said I might lose my position. Maybe even pay fines." The narrator didn't reply. Karen continued, her voice cracking. "I was only trying to keep the neighborhood perfect. I wanted things to be in order. I wanted people to respect me." She looked up at him, eyes full of fear. "But you ruined everything." The narrator didn't blink. "No, Karen," he said softly. "You ruined everything." Karen's lips trembled. She wiped her eyes, frustrated with herself for showing weakness. "I know, okay? I know I did. But can't we just forget it? Take back the complaint? Please?" There it was. The truth. She wasn't sorry. She wasn't learning. She was begging for her power back. "No," he said simply. Karen stiffened. "But you crossed the line. Many times. You threatened me. You damaged my driveway. You harassed me." Her eyes widened. "I didn't mean to. It just everything got out of control." "It got out of control because you wanted control," he replied. "You treated people like they belonged to you." Karen stepped back like the words physically hit her. "I'm not a bad person," she whispered. He didn't answer. That silence broke her more than words ever could. The next morning arrived with surprising speed. Karen's house still looked dark, but before noon, 2 HOA cars pulled into her driveway. Then a police car. Then a city code enforcement vehicle. The narrator stood at his window again, watching the scene unfold quietly. Karen stepped outside slowly, dressed properly this time but still looking drained. Her hands shook as she tried to greet the officers. The HOA president held a document, a formal notice. The narrator couldn't hear the words, but he could read the body language. Karen tried to argue. She tried to explain. She tried to justify everything she did. But this time, no one believed her. The HOA officials handed her a paper and pointed toward the neighborhood sign, her place of authority. The police officer spoke gently but firmly. "Rules. Boundaries. Warnings." Karen's face crumpled. Tears formed. She shook her head again and again, but reality wasn't changing. Finally, the officer spoke 2 words that echoed across the street. "It's final." Karen took the paper and pressed it to her chest like it was a wound. Her HOA badge, the tiny metal symbol she treated like a crown, was removed and placed into the president's hand. Just like that. Her reign ended. By afternoon, Karen's blinds opened for the first time in days. She walked to her mailbox slowly, quietly, almost invisible. Neighbors who once feared her now ignored her completely. No one looked at her. No one waved. No one cared. The power she once used like a weapon was gone forever. The narrator stepped outside to check his mail. He didn't look at her directly, but he could feel her watching him. She finally spoke, barely loud enough to hear. "I'm sorry." It wasn't loud. It wasn't confident. It wasn't strong. But maybe, just maybe, it was real. The narrator didn't answer. He didn't need to. He simply walked back to his house and inside, closing the door behind him. Not out of anger. Out of peace. For the first time in a long time, peace finally felt possible. That evening, he stood in his driveway, looking at the sunset reflecting across the concrete. The crack from the workers was already sealed. The paint was cleaned. The air felt fresh again. Karen stayed inside her house, quiet and small. Not dangerous anymore. Not powerful. Just a person who had finally faced consequences. The narrator breathed deeply. He didn't win because he fought louder. He won because he stayed calm. And he used the truth like a shield instead of a weapon. Karen's downfall wasn't dramatic or explosive. It was simple. She lost because her lies collapsed under their own weight. And he rebuilt what she tried to break. Peace, finally restored.